In the scorching heat of a military training facility, where the toughest warriors on Earth pushed their limits beyond human endurance, there stood a figure that seemed completely out of place.
He was neither the tallest nor the most intimidating presence in the room.
His voice barely rose above a whisper, and his gentle demeanor made seasoned soldiers smirk behind his back. They called him the Mouse when they thought he couldn't hear, rolling their eyes at his soft-spoken instructions and questioning how someone so quiet could possibly teach them anything about warfare. But what these elite Navy SEALs didn't know was that they were standing in the presence of a ghost, a man whose silence wasn't weakness, but the calm that comes after surviving hell itself. Behind those quiet eyes lay stories that would make their blood run cold, experiences that had forged him in fires they couldn't even imagine. 300 confirmed kills, 300 lives taken with precision that bordered on the supernatural. 300 reasons why the enemy had learned to fear the shadows. The SEALs were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the one that roars the loudest, it's the one that strikes in perfect deadly silence. And their weak instructor was about to show them exactly what real warfare looked like, one lesson at a time, until every single one of them would understand why legends are often born from the quietest corners of the battlefield.
This is the true story of how mockery turned to reverence, how doubt transformed into awe, and how the most unlikely teacher became the most unforgettable mentor these warriors would ever encounter.
The morning sun blazed mercilessly over the Naval Special Warfare Command training facility in Coronado, California. Inside the concrete walls of Building 164, 24 of the Navy's most elite warriors sat in uncomfortable metal chairs, their faces displaying various degrees of skepticism and barely concealed irritation.
These were SEALs who had survived Hell Week, men who had earned their trident through trials that broke 90% of those who attempted them.
They were accustomed to instructors who commanded respect through sheer physical presence and thunderous voices that could shake the foundation of buildings. Instead, they found themselves staring at Thomas Mitchell, a man who looked more like a librarian than a military instructor. At 5'8" and weighing barely 160 pounds, Mitchell seemed almost fragile compared to the muscular giants surrounding him. His graying hair was neatly combed, his uniform pressed to perfection, and his voice when he finally spoke was so quiet that several SEALs had to lean forward to hear him properly. "Good morning, gentlemen," Mitchell said, his words carrying no more force than a gentle breeze. "I'm here to teach you about precision marksmanship and advanced tactical awareness." Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, a decorated SEAL with 3 combat deployments under his belt, exchanged glances with his teammates. Sullivan had expected someone like Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, their previous instructor, a man whose voice could be heard 3 buildings away and whose reputation preceded him like thunder before lightning. Instead, they got this soft-spoken individual who looked like he'd be more comfortable discussing literature than lethal tactics. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Thompson, sitting in the back row, leaned over to his buddy and whispered, "Are we supposed to learn how to whisper the enemy to death?" The comment drew muffled chuckles from several nearby SEALs, though they were careful to keep their amusement subtle. These were professional warriors, after all, and they maintained a baseline level of respect for any instructor, regardless of their initial impressions.
Mitchell seemed oblivious to their skepticism as he moved to the front of the classroom with surprising grace.
There was something different about the way he carried himself, though. None of the SEALs could quite put their finger on it. His movements were economical, precise, like every step had been calculated to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum effort. It was the kind of movement that came from years of training, though it seemed almost too refined for a combat instructor.
"Before we begin," Mitchell continued in his quiet tone, "I want to share something with you about the nature of warfare."
Most people believe that the loudest gun wins the fight, that the biggest explosion clears the battlefield, that victory belongs to those who can make the most noise. He paused, scanning the room with eyes that seemed older than his apparent age. "In my experience, the opposite is usually true." Seaman Rodriguez, one of the younger SEALs in the group, raised his hand tentatively.
"Sir, with respect, what exactly is your experience?"
"We haven't seen your service record, and we're wondering what qualifies you to teach advanced tactics to operators who have been in active combat zones." The question hung in the air like a challenge, though Rodriguez had asked it with genuine curiosity rather than outright disrespect. Mitchell nodded slowly, as if he had expected this line of inquiry from the beginning.
"That's a fair question, Rodriguez," Mitchell replied, somehow knowing the young SEAL's name without having been introduced.
"My service record is classified at levels that would take you several years of clearance applications to access.
What I can tell you is that I spent 15 years in positions that officially don't exist, working in places that aren't supposed to have American personnel, doing things that never happened according to any government records. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a veteran with over 12 years of SEAL operations behind him, sat up straighter in his chair.
He recognized the carefully neutral language that suggested black operations, the kind of work that created legends and ghosts in equal measure. Still, Mitchell's mild-mannered appearance made it difficult to imagine him in any kind of combat role, let alone the shadowy world of classified operations. Today, Mitchell continued, we're going to start with something simple. Basic marksmanship principles. I know you all consider yourselves expert marksmen, and your record suggests that confidence is well-founded. However, I'd like to introduce you to some concepts that might challenge your current understanding of precision shooting. He moved to a whiteboard and began drawing a simple diagram of a rifle sight picture. His handwriting was precise and neat, matching his overall appearance of careful control.
As he drew, he spoke about the fundamentals of breathing, trigger control, and sight alignment, basics that every SEAL had mastered years earlier in their training. Lieutenant Patterson, who held the unit's record for longest confirmed sniper kill, began to feel insulted by the elementary nature of the instruction.
He had taken down targets at distances exceeding 800 meters under combat conditions, and here was this quiet man explaining sight alignment as if they were raw recruits who had never held a rifle. "Sir," Patterson interrupted, his voice carrying just enough edge to convey his frustration, "we've all been through advanced sniper training. We know about sight alignment and breathing techniques. Maybe we could move on to something more challenging?" Mitchell turned from the whiteboard, his expression unchanged by Patterson's barely contained irritation. "Of course, Patterson. You're absolutely right that you've mastered the fundamentals. Let me ask you this. What's the furthest confirmed kill you've made in combat?" Patterson straightened with pride. 873 meters, sir. Taliban commander in Afghanistan, single-shot moving target. "Impressive," Mitchell acknowledged with what seemed like genuine respect. "Wind conditions? Crosswind at approximately 12 knots, gusting to 15, Patterson replied, warming to the subject. Had to compensate for both wind drift and the target's movement pattern. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Excellent work under difficult conditions. That kind of shot requires not just technical skill, but the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. He paused for a moment, seeming to consider something. The longest shot I ever made was just over 2,000 meters. The room fell completely silent. 2,000 meters was beyond the range of most sniper rifles, requiring not just exceptional skill but also perfect conditions and equipment that was rarely available even to elite units. Several of the SEALs exchanged glances, unsure whether to believe such a claim from their unassuming instructor. That's beyond the effective range of most sniper systems, Chief Williams observed carefully. You're correct, Mitchell replied simply. It required special equipment and very specific conditions. It also required patience. I waited in position for 37 hours before the shot presented itself. 37 hours. The number resonated through the room like a stone dropping into still water. Every SEAL understood what that meant. Lying motionless in hostile territory for more than a day, maintaining perfect discipline while waiting for a single moment of opportunity. It was the kind of patience that separated true professionals from merely skilled soldiers. Petty Officer Thompson, the same one who had made the whispered joke earlier, found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of their instructor. 37 hours in position suggested a level of mental discipline that few people possessed. It spoke of someone who understood that warfare was as much about psychological endurance as physical skill. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, Mitchell continued, returning to his diagram on the whiteboard. Before we discuss advanced techniques, I want to make sure we're all operating from the same foundation. The fundamentals I'm reviewing aren't just basics, they're the building blocks that everything else depends on. A 2,000-meter shot is still just trigger control, breathing, and sight alignment. The distance doesn't change the principles. He began explaining the interconnected nature of the shooting fundamentals, describing how each element affected all the others in ways that most shooters never fully understood. His explanations were methodical and precise, revealing layers of complexity within concepts the SEALs had always considered simple. As he spoke, something began to shift in the room's atmosphere. The SEALs found themselves listening more carefully, picking up on subtle details in Mitchell's explanations that revealed depths of knowledge they hadn't expected. His quiet voice, which had initially seemed like a sign of weakness, began to take on a different quality. The calm assurance of someone who had no need to raise his voice because he knew his words carried weight. Lieutenant Sullivan, despite his initial skepticism, found himself taking notes as Mitchell described advanced trigger control techniques that went far beyond anything he'd learned in sniper school. The instructor's methods were unconventional but logically sound, based on principles of biomechanics and psychology that clearly came from extensive practical experience. The human body, Mitchell was explaining, is a system of interconnected variables. Most shooters focus on controlling individual elements, breathing, trigger finger, sight picture, without understanding how these elements influence each other. True precision comes from learning to control the entire system as a unified whole. As the morning progressed, the atmosphere in the room continued to evolve. The initial skepticism gave way to grudging attention, then to genuine interest as Mitchell demonstrated knowledge that clearly went beyond textbook learning. His examples were specific and detailed, suggesting first-hand experience with situations that most soldiers would never encounter. When he described the psychological effects of extended surveillance operations, several veteran SEALs recognized the accuracy of his observations. When he explained the physiological challenges of maintaining shooting precision under extreme stress, his insights matched their own hard-won combat experience. Gradually, they began to understand that their quiet instructor might have more to teach them than they had initially assumed. The first morning ended with Mitchell assigning them reading materials and practice exercises that were more sophisticated than anything they had encountered in previous advanced training courses. As the SEALs filed out of the classroom, their conversations were noticeably different from the mocking whispers that had begun the day. "Did you hear how he described target psychology?" Rodriguez asked Thompson as they walked toward the mess hall. "That stuff about reading enemy behavior patterns, I've never heard it explained that way before."
Thompson nodded thoughtfully.
"And that thing about the 37-hour shot? You can't fake that kind of detail. Either he's making up an incredibly elaborate story, or he actually did it." As they discussed their morning's instruction, none of them noticed Mitchell standing quietly in the doorway behind them, watching their departing figures with eyes that seemed to hold secrets they couldn't begin to imagine. In his mind, he was already planning the next day's lessons, knowing that true understanding would come, not from his words, but from what he would soon show them on the range. The transformation had begun. Though the SEALs didn't realize it yet, their quiet instructor was about to take them on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare, precision, and the true meaning of lethal effectiveness. The mockery was already fading, replaced by the first stirrings of curiosity about the man who spoke softly but carried secrets that ran deeper than any of them could guess. The following morning brought an unseasonably cool breeze to the Coronado training facility, a welcome relief from the previous day's oppressive heat. The SEALs assembled at the outdoor shooting range at 060 Evo 7 hours. Their gear meticulously arranged according to Mitchell's specific instructions. Each man carried his preferred rifle system along with the standard issue equipment, but Mitchell had also requested several items that seemed unusual for a basic marksmanship session. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan surveyed his men as they prepared for the day's training. The previous evening had been filled with speculation about their new instructor, ranging from theories about his possible special operations background to outright dismissal of his claimed 2,000-meter shot. Sullivan himself remained undecided, though he had spent considerable time researching classified sniper records, finding frustratingly few details about operations from the time frame Mitchell had implied. Mitchell arrived at precisely 0600, carrying a weathered case that looked like it had seen considerable field use. Unlike the pristine equipment cases typically used on training ranges, this one bore the scars of real-world deployment, scratches, dents, and faded markings that suggested it had been to places where appearance mattered less than functionality. "Good morning, gentlemen," Mitchell said in his characteristic quiet tone. "Today we move from theory to practical application. I want each of you to demonstrate your current skill level before we begin introducing new concepts." He gestured toward the range, where targets had been positioned at various distances from 100 to 600 meters. The setup was standard for advanced marksmanship training, though several SEALs noticed additional equipment positioned near the firing line that they couldn't immediately identify. Chief Petty Officer Williams stepped forward first, settling into his preferred prone position with the smooth efficiency that marked him as an experienced operator. The setup was the smooth efficiency that his rifle was a customized M110 semi-automatic sniper system that he had personally modified over years of deployment rotations. Williams took his time establishing his sight picture, controlling his breathing, and achieving the mental state that preceded accurate shooting. The shot broke cleanly, and spotters confirmed a center mass hit on the 300-meter target. Williams cycled his bolt and prepared for his next shot, feeling confident in his performance. He had placed similar shots thousands of times in training and hundreds of times in combat situations where lives depended on his accuracy. "Excellent technical execution," Mitchell observed, his voice carrying easily across the range despite its gentle tone. "Williams, walk me through your sight picture acquisition process." Williams detailed his method while maintaining his shooting position. He described his breathing pattern, his trigger control technique, and his mental approach to managing shooting stress. His explanation was thorough and professional, reflecting years of experience and formal training. Mitchell listened carefully, occasionally asking specific questions that revealed his own deep understanding of marksmanship principles. When Williams finished his explanation, Mitchell nodded approvingly before offering his own observations. "Your technique is solid, Chief. I can see you've spent considerable time developing consistency in your fundamentals." Mitchell paused, studying Williams' position through a spotting scope.
"However, I notice several subtle inefficiencies that are limiting your potential accuracy." Williams tensed slightly.
He took pride in his shooting skills and had consistently scored among the highest in his unit on marksmanship evaluations. The suggestion that his technique contained flaws was unexpected and somewhat irritating. "What kind of inefficiencies?" Williams asked, genuine curiosity overriding his defensive reaction. Mitchell moved closer, kneeling beside Williams's shooting position. "Your body position creates unnecessary muscular tension through your shoulders and neck. This tension transmits micro-movements to your rifle that affect precision, especially at extended ranges." As he spoke, Mitchell made small adjustments to Williams' position, minor changes in elbow placement, slight modifications to his grip, subtle shifts in body alignment that seemed insignificant but felt noticeably different to the experienced shooter.
Now take your shot, Mitchell instructed quietly.
Williams settled into the modified position, surprised by how natural it felt despite being different from his established technique. He went through his usual shooting routine, but found that his sight picture seemed more stable, his breathing felt more controlled, and the rifle seemed to settle more naturally into perfect alignment. When the shot broke, Williams knew immediately that something was different. The recoil felt smoother, the follow-through felt more natural, and his instinctive sense told him the shot was more precise than usual.
When did you start?
The spotters confirmed his instinct. The bullet had struck within millimeters of the previous shot, but with noticeably better precision.
How did that feel?
Mitchell asked. Williams considered the question carefully. Better. More controlled, somehow. The modifications I made reduced the physical stress your body was creating in your shooting platform, Mitchell explained. When your muscular system is fighting against itself, those tensions translate directly into rifle movement. Small changes in position can eliminate those internal conflicts and allow your body to work as a unified system.
Other SEALs began gathering around Williams' position, interested in seeing the adjustments Mitchell had made.
Lieutenant Patterson, still somewhat skeptical of their instructor's credentials, volunteered to try the modified technique on his own rifle system. Patterson prided himself on being the unit's premier marksman, and his ego was involved in proving that his established techniques were superior to any modifications some classroom instructor might suggest.
He settled into his normal shooting position with perhaps more assertiveness than usual, determined to demonstrate that his methods were already optimal. Mitchell observed Patterson's setup without comment, allowing the SEAL to establish his position according to his own preferences. Patterson took a careful shot at a 400-meter target, achieving what he considered an excellent result, a hit within the target's center scoring ring. "Very good shooting, Patterson," Mitchell acknowledged. "Now, if you're willing, I'd like to try the same positional adjustments I made for Williams." Patterson agreed, though his body language suggested he expected little improvement. Mitchell made similar modifications to Patterson's position, adjusting body alignment and eliminating muscular tensions that Patterson hadn't even realized he was carrying. The difference in Patterson's next shot was dramatic. Not only was it more accurate than his previous attempt, but the entire shooting process felt smoother and more natural. Patterson cycled his bolt and took another shot, then another, each one grouping more tightly than he had achieved with his previous technique. "I don't understand," Patterson admitted, his skepticism beginning to transform into genuine curiosity. "These changes seem minor, but the improvement is significant. How did you identify those specific adjustments?" Mitchell smiled slightly, the first time the SEALs had seen any emotional expression from their instructor. "Experience, mostly. When you've taken enough shots under enough different conditions, you begin to understand how small variables compound into large effects." Petty Officer Thompson raised his hand. "Sir, when you mentioned your longest shot yesterday, 2,000 meters, what kind of conditions were you dealing with? What made that shot possible?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "The target was a high-value individual who had been responsible for killing several American personnel. Intelligence indicated he would be visiting a specific location at a predictable time, but the only available shooting position was at extreme." He gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. The shot required waiting for perfect atmospheric conditions: minimal wind, stable temperature, optimal humidity levels. It also required equipment that pushed the boundaries of what rifle systems could accomplish at that distance. What kind of equipment? Lieutenant Sullivan asked. A highly modified system based on the Shytac M200 platform, with custom ballistic computers and specialized ammunition, Mitchell replied. But the equipment was only part of the equation. The more critical factors were patience, environmental reading, and understanding how small variables affect bullet trajectory over extreme distances. Mitchell moved to his weathered equipment case and withdrew a rifle that immediately commanded attention from every SEAL present. The weapon was unlike anything they had seen in standard military inventory. Clearly a precision instrument built for specific purposes rather than general military use. The rifle's stock showed signs of field use, but every component was obviously maintained to exacting standards.
The scope mounted on top was a specialized system that several of the SEALs recognized as being far beyond typical military issue. This was the tool of a serious precision shooter, someone who had invested considerable resources into creating the ultimate accuracy platform.
This is the system I used for that shot, Mitchell said simply. It represents about 15 years of modifications and improvements based on field experience in environments ranging from desert to Arctic conditions. Chief Williams approached the rifle with obvious appreciation. Sir, this is extraordinary craftsmanship. I've never seen this level of customization on a field weapon. Each modification was made to solve a specific problem encountered during operations, Mitchell explained. The trigger system eliminates mechanical variations that affect precision. The stock design reduces environmental sensitivity. The scope incorporates ballistic computers that account for variables most shooters never consider. Began demonstrating the rifle's features, explaining how each component contributed to overall system accuracy. His knowledge was clearly based on extensive practical experience rather than theoretical study. When he discussed ammunition selection, environmental effects, and ballistic calculations, his explanations revealed understanding that could only come from years of real-world application. Lieutenant Patterson found himself completely absorbed in Mitchell's technical explanations. The instructor's knowledge went far beyond anything Patterson had encountered in formal sniper training, encompassing aspects of precision shooting that he had never considered. More importantly, Mitchell's insights were proving their value through demonstrated improvements in the SEAL's own shooting performance. Sir, Rodriguez asked hesitantly, would it be possible for us to see a demonstration of this system's capabilities? Mitchell considered the request carefully. The range here doesn't extend to distances where this system's full potential would be apparent. However, I can show you some techniques that will improve your accuracy at the ranges we have available. He settled into a shooting position that looked almost casual compared to the formal stances the SEALs had been trained to use.
There are people who have their own techniques that will be carried by the time changer.
His body seemed to flow naturally into optimal alignment, without the deliberate positioning and muscular tension that characterized military shooting techniques. When Mitchell fired his first shot at a 600-meter target, the result was immediately visible through spotting scopes. The bullet had struck within the target's center ring with precision that exceeded anything the SEALs had achieved that morning. His follow-up shots formed a group so tight that spotters had difficulty distinguishing individual bullet holes. That's incredible accuracy, Thompson observed. The group size at that distance is better than what most of us achieve at half the range. Mitchell rose from his shooting position with the same fluid grace he had displayed while settling into it. Accuracy at this level isn't about superior physical abilities or extraordinary equipment, he explained. It's about understanding and controlling all the variables that affect bullet flight, including variables that most shooters never learn to recognize. He spent the remainder of the morning working individually with each SEAL, making specific adjustments to their techniques and explaining the reasoning behind each modification. His instructions were always precise and clearly explained, revealing layers of understanding that went far beyond standard military training. As the session progressed, the atmosphere among the SEALs continued to evolve. The casual dismissal of their instructor had been completely abandoned, replaced by genuine respect for his knowledge and abilities. Even more significantly, their own shooting performance was improving dramatically under Mitchell's guidance. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan found himself reassessing not only Mitchell's credentials but also his own understanding of marksmanship principles. The improvements his men were demonstrating were undeniable, and they were achieving these results through techniques that were clearly based on extensive practical experience. When the morning session concluded, Mitchell assigned specific practice exercises for each SEAL based on the individual weaknesses he had identified. His assignments were personalized and sophisticated, suggesting that he had quickly developed accurate assessments of each man's strengths and areas for improvement. As the SEALs gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the range, Their conversations reflected a complete transformation in their attitudes toward their instructor. The quiet man they had initially dismissed was proving to possess knowledge and skills that exceeded anything they had encountered in their previous training. "Did you see the group he shot at 600 meters?" Rodriguez asked Thompson as they cleaned their rifles. "I've never seen accuracy like that from anyone, including our best snipers." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "And those modifications he made to my position? I felt the difference immediately."
My shots were more consistent than they've ever been.
Behind them, Mitchell was carefully packing his specialized rifle system, his movements precise and economical. As he worked, he seemed lost in thought, as if the morning's demonstrations had triggered memories of other times, other places where such precision had meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The SEALs were beginning to understand that their instructor was far more than he appeared to be. The quiet exterior concealed depths of experience and expertise that they were only beginning to glimpse. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new challenges, and new insights into the true nature of the man who spoke softly but carried secrets that ran deeper than any of them had imagined. The third day of training brought an unexpected change to their routine. Instead of meeting at the familiar outdoor range, Mitchell had directed the SEALs to assemble at a classified facility 30 miles inland from Coronado. The building was unmarked and surrounded by multiple security checkpoints that required special clearances the SEALs didn't know they possessed. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan had received the orders through channels he had never encountered before. Communications that bypassed normal command structures and arrived with authentication codes that verified their legitimacy through systems he couldn't access. The unusual nature of the arrangements had prompted him to make several discreet inquiries, but his contacts in Naval Special Warfare Command claimed to have no knowledge of the facility or the training program. The SEALs arrived at the designated coordinates to find themselves at what appeared to be a private contractor facility that specialized in advanced tactical training. The buildings were modern and well-maintained, but there were no identifying signs or markings that would reveal the organization that operated the complex. Several expensive vehicles with government plates were parked in a secured area, suggesting that high-level personnel frequently used the facility. Mitchell was waiting for them in what appeared to be a sophisticated briefing room equipped with advanced audiovisual systems and secure communications equipment. The room's setup suggested it was designed for classified briefings involving sensitive information and personnel with very high security clearances.
"Good morning, gentlemen," Mitchell said in his familiar, quiet tone.
Today, we're going to discuss advanced, tactical applications of precision marksmanship in real-world operational environments. He activated a large display screen that showed satellite imagery of various global locations. The images were clearly recent and of exceptional quality, suggesting access to intelligence resources that were typically reserved for active operations rather than training exercises.
Over the next few hours, I'm going to share some case studies from actual operations. Mitchell continued.
These examples will illustrate principles that can't be taught through classroom instruction or range exercises alone. Chief Petty Officer Williams recognized several of the locations displayed on the screen. They were areas where American forces had conducted sensitive operations over the past decade, though the specific details of those operations remained classified at levels far above his security clearance. The first case study involved an operation in Afghanistan where enemy forces had established a command post in a heavily fortified compound. Traditional assault approaches would have resulted in significant casualties among both American forces and civilian populations in the surrounding area. The mission required neutralizing specific high-value targets while avoiding collateral damage. Mitchell explained using a laser pointer to highlight relevant features on the satellite imagery.
Intelligence indicated that the targets would be present at the compound for only a brief window, making precision timing essential.
He described the operational planning process in detail that revealed intimate familiarity with how such missions were conceived and executed. His knowledge encompassed not only the tactical aspects but also the intelligence preparation, logistical coordination, and political considerations that affected operational decisions. The primary challenge was achieving precision engagement at ranges exceeding normal sniper capabilities while remaining undetected in hostile territory, Mitchell continued. The shooting position had to be established more than 1,500 meters from the target compound to avoid enemy security patrols. Lieutenant Patterson listened intently as Mitchell described the environmental factors that affected the operation. Wind conditions, temperature variations, humidity levels, and even atmospheric pressure all played crucial roles in determining whether precision shots would be achievable at such extreme ranges.
The shooter in this case had to remain in position for 42 hours before the target window presented itself, Mitchell said. During that time, he couldn't move more than a few inches without risking detection by enemy surveillance systems.
The psychological challenges of such operations became apparent as Mitchell described the mental discipline required to maintain perfect stillness while remaining alert for over 40 hours. The shooter had to monitor constantly changing environmental conditions while preserving the precise muscle control necessary for accurate shooting when the moment finally arrived. When the engagement window opened, the shooter had approximately 30 seconds to identify, range, and engage 3 separate targets, Mitchell explained. The first target presented at 1520 meters, the second at 1540 meters, and the third at 1560 meters. Petty Officer Thompson found himself completely absorbed in the tactical details. The complexity of engaging multiple targets at varying ranges within such a brief time window was staggering. Each shot would require different ballistic calculations, and there would be no opportunity for corrections if the first shots missed their marks. All 3 targets were successfully neutralized with single shots, Mitchell concluded. The operation achieved its objectives with no American casualties and minimal impact on civilian populations. He paused, allowing the SEALs to consider the implications of what they had heard. Then he activated another display showing a different operational scenario. This one in a desert environment where different challenges had tested the limits of precision marksmanship. The second case study involved an operation where enemy forces had taken hostages in a remote facility. Rescue operations were complicated by the isolated location and the need to prevent the hostage takers from executing their prisoners if they detected an incoming assault. Intelligence indicated that the hostage takers were monitoring all approach routes to the facility, Mitchell explained. Any conventional rescue attempt would be detected long before assault teams could reach effective range. The solution had involved positioning a precision shooter at extreme range to eliminate key targets simultaneously with the beginning of the rescue assault. The coordination required split-second timing across multiple elements of the operation, with no margin for error. The longest engagement in this operation was at 1830 meters, Mitchell said quietly. Environmental conditions were extremely challenging. High winds, shifting temperatures, and visibility limited by blowing sand. As Mitchell described the technical aspects of the shot, several SEALs began to realize that the level of detail in his explanations suggested personal involvement rather than academic study. His knowledge of environmental effects, equipment performance, and psychological factors was too specific and nuanced to have been acquired through briefings or written reports. Lieutenant Sullivan found himself studying Mitchell more carefully, looking for clues about their instructor's true background. The man's calm demeanor and precise way of speaking suggested someone accustomed to high-stress situations where words carried enormous consequences. His knowledge of operational procedures indicated involvement in missions that were classified far above normal military activities. "Sir," Rodriguez asked carefully, "the operations you're describing, are these actual historical events or hypothetical scenarios for training purposes?" Mitchell considered the question for a moment before answering. "These are real operations that achieve their objectives through the application of principles we've been discussing. The specific details I'm sharing have been approved for instructional use, though many aspects of these missions remain classified." The implications of his answer resonated through the room. The SEALs were being taught by someone who had been personally involved in operations that existed at the highest levels of classified military activity. This is the book it's about history at the back of the press. Their quiet instructor was not just a skilled marksman but a participant in missions that shaped global events from the shadows. Chief Williams raised his hand. "Sir, the psychological pressures you've described, maintaining position for 42 hours, making precision shots with hostage lives depending on accuracy. How does someone develop the mental discipline for that kind of responsibility?" Mitchell's expression became thoughtful, as if the question had triggered memories he rarely examined. "It comes gradually, through experience with progressively more challenging situations. Each mission teaches lessons that prepare you for the next one, until you develop the confidence to accept responsibility for outcomes where failure isn't an option." He moved to another display showing global locations where precision marksmanship had played decisive roles in complex operations. The scope of the missions represented years of deployment in environments ranging from Arctic conditions to tropical jungles, each presenting unique challenges for precision shooting. "The technical skills we've been practicing are essential," Mitchell continued, "but they're only the foundation. Real-world operations require adapting those skills to conditions that can't be replicated in training environments." As the briefing progressed, Mitchell shared increasingly sophisticated scenarios that revealed the evolution of precision marksmanship in modern warfare. He described operations where single shots had prevented terrorist attacks, eliminated enemy leaders, and enabled successful rescue missions that saved civilian lives. The stories were told in his characteristic quiet manner. But the SEALs began to understand that they were hearing accounts of missions that had altered the course of events in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. Their instructor had been present at moments when individual actions had consequences far beyond normal military operations.
The longest confirmed shot I mentioned on our first day, Mitchell said after a long pause, was taken during a mission where enemy forces were preparing to execute a group of captured aid workers. The shot was the only way to prevent multiple civilian casualties.
The room fell silent as the SEALs absorbed the implications of this revelation. Their instructor's 2,000-meter shot hadn't been a training exercise or a marksmanship demonstration. It had been a life-or-death moment where perfect precision was the only thing standing between innocent people and execution.
Lieutenant Patterson found himself completely reassessing his understanding of Mitchell's capabilities. The quiet man who had initially seemed unsuited for military instruction was revealing himself to be someone who had operated at levels where individual actions carried enormous consequences.
"Sir," Patterson asked quietly, "how many operations have you been involved in?"
Mitchell was quiet for several moments before answering.
Over a 15-year period, I participated in operations across 4 continents. Some lasted only a few hours, others extended over several months. Each one required different applications of the principles we've been studying. The weight of experience represented by those words was staggering. 15 years of operations across multiple continents suggested involvement in some of the most sensitive missions conducted by American forces during a period of intense global conflict.
As the afternoon session continued, Mitchell shared increasingly detailed technical information about equipment, techniques, and procedures that clearly came from extensive field experience.
His knowledge encompassed not only marksmanship but also surveillance techniques, infiltration methods, and survival skills that enabled long-term operations in hostile territory.
The SEALs found themselves taking notes furiously as Mitchell described equipment modifications, environmental adaptation techniques, and psychological preparation methods that went far beyond anything they had encountered in formal military training.
His instruction was revealing layers of expertise that could only have been developed through years of real-world application. Tomorrow, Mitchell concluded as the session ended, we're going to put these principles into practice through practical exercises that simulate real operational conditions.
As the SEALs gathered their materials and prepared to leave the facility, their conversations reflected the profound impact of what they had learned.
The case studies and technical details had transformed their understanding of what precision marksmanship could accomplish in the hands of someone with Mitchell's level of expertise. Did you realize we're being taught by someone who has probably influenced global events through individual actions? Thompson asked Rodriguez as they walked to their vehicles.
Rodriguez shook his head slowly. When I first saw him, I thought he looked like a librarian.
Now I'm wondering if he's one of the most dangerous people any of us has ever met.
Behind them, Mitchell was securing the briefing materials in locked containers that would be transported back to secure storage. His movements remained precise and economical, but there was something in his posture that suggested the weight of memories that extended far beyond what he had shared with his students.
The SEALs were beginning to understand that their instructor carried secrets that ran deeper than they had imagined. The quiet exterior concealed a history of actions taken in the shadows, where individual precision had shaped events that would never be publicly acknowledged. Tomorrow would bring new revelations about the true nature of the man who spoke softly, but had changed the world through perfect shots taken from impossible distances. The 4th day brought the SEALs to yet another classified facility, this one located in the mountains east of San Diego, where vast stretches of restricted military land provided perfect conditions for advanced tactical exercises.
The landscape was rugged and challenging, offering natural obstacles and extended sightlines that would test every skill they had learned during their previous sessions with Mitchell. As they arrived at the designated coordinates, the SEALs found themselves at what appeared to be a permanent training facility designed specifically for long-range precision operations.
The complex included multiple observation towers, concealed firing positions, and sophisticated target systems that could simulate real-world operational scenarios with remarkable accuracy. Mitchell was waiting for them beside a collection of equipment cases that suggested today's training would be significantly more intensive than their previous sessions.
His usual quiet demeanor seemed unchanged, but there was something in his bearing that suggested he was preparing to reveal capabilities that would challenge everything the SEALs thought they knew about precision marksmanship. Today we move from theory and case studies to practical application.
Mitchell announced as the SEALs gathered around him.
You're going to experience firsthand what precision shooting means under conditions that approximate real operational environments. He gestured toward the surrounding terrain, which stretched for miles in every direction with natural and artificial obstacles positioned at various distances. The setup was clearly designed to test shooting skills at ranges that exceeded normal training parameters while incorporating environmental challenges that would stress even experienced marksmen.
Each of you will be given specific scenarios that require problem solving as well as marksmanship, Mitchell continued. Success will depend on your ability to adapt the techniques we've discussed to conditions that can't be predicted or controlled. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan studied the terrain through binoculars, noting target positions at distances that seemed to approach the theoretical limits of small arms effectiveness.
Some of the targets were positioned at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, while others were partially concealed or positioned in ways that would require indirect approaches to achieve clear sight lines.
Chief Petty Officer Williams raised his hand. Sir, some of these target distances appeared to be beyond the effective range of our standard rifle systems. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Excellent observation, Chief.
Today, you'll be working with equipment that extends your capabilities significantly beyond standard military systems.
He opened the equipment cases to reveal a collection of rifles and optical systems that immediately commanded attention from every SEAL present. The weapons were clearly custom-built platforms designed for extreme-range precision shooting, incorporating technology and modifications that went far beyond anything they had encountered in military inventory.
These systems are similar to what I used during operations we discussed yesterday, Mitchell explained as he distributed the rifles among the SEALs. Each one has been individually customized and precisely calibrated for maximum accuracy at extended ranges. Lieutenant Patterson accepted his assigned rifle with obvious appreciation for its craftsmanship.
The weapon felt perfectly balanced in his hands, and even without firing it, he could sense that it represented a significant advancement over his familiar military-issue systems. The scope mounted on Patterson's rifle incorporated ballistic computers and environmental sensors that automatically calculated firing solutions based on range, wind conditions, temperature, humidity, and other variables that affected bullet trajectory at long distances. The technology was sophisticated enough to eliminate much of the guesswork that normally complicated precision shooting. Before you begin the practical exercises, Mitchell said, I want each of you to understand the full capabilities of the systems you'll be using. He spent the next hour explaining the technical features of each rifle and optical system, describing how various components work together to achieve accuracy levels that approach the theoretical limits of ballistic performance.
His knowledge of the equipment was clearly based on extensive field experience with similar systems under operational conditions. As Mitchell concluded his technical briefings, he directed the SEALs toward different positions scattered throughout the training area.
Each man would face unique challenges requiring individual problem-solving approaches that incorporated everything they had learned during the previous days of instruction. Petty Officer Thompson found himself positioned on a ridge overlooking a valley where targets had been placed at distances ranging from 800 to 1,500 meters.
The shooting position offered excellent visibility, but required precise range estimation and careful environmental analysis to achieve accurate results. Thompson settled into his firing position and began the methodical process of analyzing his shooting environment.
Wind conditions were variable, with different speeds and directions at various distances downrange. Temperature gradients created atmospheric effects that would influence bullet trajectory in ways that required careful calculation.
Using the advanced ballistic computer integrated into his rifle scope, Thompson began calculating firing solutions for each target. The process was more complex than anything he had encountered in previous training, requiring him to consider variables that he had never learned to analyze systematically. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Patterson faced a different challenge from his position on the opposite side of the valley. His targets were positioned at even greater distances, with some approaching the 2,000-meter range that Mitchell had mentioned as his longest confirmed shot. The technical demands of engaging targets at such extreme ranges would test the absolute limits of Patterson's skills and equipment. Patterson spent considerable time studying atmospheric conditions through his advanced optical system. Heat waves rising from the valley floor created mirages that distorted target images, while varying wind patterns at different elevations would affect bullet flight paths in complex ways that required sophisticated ballistic calculations. As the individual exercises progressed, each SEAL began to understand the extraordinary complexity of precision shooting under real-world conditions. The controlled environments of normal training ranges had never prepared them for the challenges they now faced, where multiple variables interacted in ways that demanded both technical knowledge and intuitive understanding. Chief Williams, positioned in a concealed hide site that required careful camouflage and patience, found himself facing targets that appeared only briefly at unpredictable intervals. His challenge wasn't just marksmanship, but also the psychological discipline to remain perfectly still for extended periods while maintaining readiness to engage fleeting opportunities. The waiting required exactly the kind of mental discipline Mitchell had described in his operational case studies. Williams had to remain alert and prepared while fighting off fatigue, boredom, and the natural human tendency to move or adjust position for comfort. Every slight movement risked compromising his concealment or affecting his rifle's precision. As morning stretched into afternoon, the SEALs gradually began achieving success with their assigned challenges. Thompson's methodical approach to environmental analysis paid off, as he successfully engaged targets at distances he had never attempted before. His shots were guided by ballistic calculations that accounted for variables he was learning to recognize for the first time.
Patterson's persistence with extreme-range shots eventually produced results that amazed him. Using techniques Mitchell had taught him about reading atmospheric conditions and timing shots during optimal environmental windows, he successfully engaged targets at distances exceeding 1,800 meters. The accuracy he achieved at such extreme ranges seemed almost impossible given the limitations he had always associated with small-arm systems.
The combination of advanced equipment and sophisticated shooting techniques was producing results that redefined his understanding of what precision marksmanship could accomplish. As individual exercises concluded, Mitchell gathered the SEALs at a central observation point where the results of their efforts could be evaluated.
Spotting systems had recorded each shot attempt, providing precise measurements of accuracy and detailed analysis of performance factors. Your results today represent significant improvement over your baseline capabilities, Mitchell observed as he reviewed the shooting data. More importantly, you've begun to understand the complexity of real-world precision shooting under challenging conditions. The improvement in their performance was undeniable. Every SEAL had achieved accuracy levels that exceeded their previous capabilities, many by substantial margins.
The advanced equipment had certainly contributed to their success, but Mitchell's instruction had been equally important in teaching them to use sophisticated systems effectively. However, Mitchell continued, there's one more challenge I want you to experience before we conclude today's training. He led them to a position overlooking a section of the valley where a single target had been positioned at a distance that appeared to be well beyond anything they had attempted previously.
Using range-finding equipment, the SEALs determined that the target was positioned at approximately 1,900 meters from their observation point. This target represents the kind of shot that defines the absolute limits of what's possible with small-arm systems, Mitchell explained.
Engaging it successfully requires perfect execution of every technique we've discussed, along with environmental conditions that fall within very narrow parameters.
Lieutenant Sullivan studied the target through powerful binoculars.
Even at maximum magnification, the target appeared as little more than a distant speck against the landscape. The idea of engaging something so small at such extreme range seemed to push beyond the realm of possibility.
Sir, Sullivan asked carefully, are you expecting us to attempt a shot at that distance? Mitchell smiled slightly. No, Commander.
That shot is beyond what can be reasonably expected given your current experience level. However, I thought you might be interested in seeing what's possible when techniques are executed with perfect precision. He retrieved his own specialized rifle system from its case and began the methodical process of preparing for an extreme-range shot. His movements were precise and economical, reflecting years of experience with similar preparations under operational conditions where perfect execution was essential. The SEALs watched in fascination as Mitchell analyzed environmental conditions with instruments that measured wind speed and direction at multiple elevations, calculated atmospheric density effects based on temperature and humidity gradients, and determined optimal timing windows based on predictable variations in environmental factors. His preparation process took over 30 minutes, during which he methodically analyzed every variable that could affect bullet trajectory over the extreme distance to the target. The complexity of his calculations was staggering, requiring sophisticated understanding of ballistic physics and environmental effects. When Mitchell finally settled into his shooting position, his body seemed to flow naturally into perfect alignment with his rifle system. There was no apparent tension or forced positioning, just the fluid integration of man and machine that represented thousands of hours of practice under the most demanding conditions.
The shot, when it finally came, seemed almost anticlimactic.
There was no dramatic preparation or visible effort, just a single quiet report that seemed insufficient for the distance involved. Through spotting scopes, the SEALs watched the target at 1,900 meters and waited for what seemed like an eternity for the bullet to complete its flight path.
When the hit was confirmed, several SEALs found themselves speechless. The precision required to engage a target at such extreme range was almost beyond comprehension, yet they had witnessed it executed with apparent ease by their quiet instructor.
"How is that possible?" Rodriguez asked, his voice filled with genuine awe. Mitchell rose from his shooting position with the same fluid grace he had displayed while settling into it.
It's possible because every variable was controlled as precisely as current technology allows, and because the shot was taken only when environmental conditions fell within optimal parameters.
As the SEALs prepared to leave the training facility, their conversations reflected the profound impact of what they'd experienced. They had witnessed capabilities that redefined their understanding of what human skill and advanced technology could accomplish when combined effectively. More importantly, they had begun to understand the true depth of Mitchell's expertise. Their quiet instructor wasn't just an exceptional marksman. He was someone who had mastered techniques that existed at the absolute limits of human capability, developed through years of real-world application under conditions where perfection wasn't optional. The transformation in their attitudes was complete. The man they had initially dismissed as unsuited for military instruction had revealed himself to be one of the most capable individuals any of them had ever encountered. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of their training, where Mitchell would reveal the ultimate truth about his background and the operational history that had shaped him into one of America's most lethal precision shooters. The final day of training brought the SEALs back to the original classroom at Coronado, though the atmosphere was dramatically different from their first meeting 5 days earlier. The men who filed into the familiar room carried themselves with a new understanding of their instructor and a profound respect for capabilities they had witnessed but still couldn't fully comprehend. Mitchell stood at the front of the classroom, his appearance unchanged from that first morning when they had dismissed him as unsuited for military instruction. His quiet demeanor and mild-mannered exterior remained the same, but the SEALs now understood that these surface characteristics concealed depths of experience that few people on Earth possessed. "Before we conclude your training," Mitchell began in his characteristic soft voice, "I believe you deserve to understand the full context of what you've been learning and who has been teaching you." He activated the room's display system, showing what appeared to be a classified personnel file with extensive redactions. Most of the visible information consisted of deployment dates, operational classifications, and performance evaluations that revealed little specific detail but suggested involvement in missions at the highest levels of military operations.
My official military record shows 15 years of service in positions that are designated as classified activities in support of national security objectives, Mitchell explained.
The specific details of those positions and the missions they involved remain classified at levels that would require congressional approval to access. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan found himself studying the partial file information with professional interest. The deployment patterns and classification codes suggested involvement in operations that existed at the intersection of military, intelligence, and diplomatic activities, the kind of missions that shaped global events from the shadows. "What I can share with you," Mitchell continued, "is that during those 15 years, I participated in operations across 6 continents, in environments ranging from Arctic conditions to tropical jungles, under circumstances that required precision shooting at distances, and under conditions that pushed the absolute limits of what human capability and technology could achieve." The display changed to show a map of the world with numerous locations marked by small symbols that presumably represented operational deployments. The geographic scope was staggering, encompassing areas where American military involvement had never been publicly acknowledged. Each symbol represents a mission where precision marksmanship was the critical factor in achieving operational objectives, Mitchell said quietly. Some missions lasted only hours, others extended over several months. All of them required the techniques and principles we've been studying together.
Chief Petty Officer Williams raised his hand tentatively.
"Sir, the techniques you've taught us, they're clearly based on extensive practical experience. But some of the capabilities you've demonstrated seem to go beyond what would normally be possible for any individual operator." Mitchell nodded approvingly at the observation. "You're absolutely correct, Chief. No single individual could develop such capabilities working alone. What you've been learning represents the collective knowledge of a very small community of specialists who have spent decades perfecting techniques through trial and error under operational conditions." He gestured toward the display, which now showed organizational charts with extensive redactions. "The unit I served with for most of my career was officially designated as a Special Activities Division within an organization that doesn't appear on standard military organizational charts." The implications of this revelation resonated through the room. The SEALs understood that Mitchell was describing involvement in operations conducted by organizations that existed in the classified margins of American national security activities, groups that operated under authorities and with capabilities that were never publicly discussed.
Our primary mission was to provide precision engagement capabilities for situations where traditional military approaches were either impossible or would create unacceptable political complications, Mitchell continued.
"We specialized in operations where individual actions could achieve strategic objectives without the large-scale military involvement that normal operations required.
Lieutenant Patterson found himself completely absorbed in Mitchell's explanation. The concept of achieving strategic objectives through individual precision actions represented a level of operational sophistication that went far beyond conventional military thinking.
Over the course of my operational career, Mitchell said after a long pause, I was directly responsible for neutralizing 300 enemy combatants through precision marksmanship. The number hit the room like a physical force. 300 confirmed kills represented a level of combat effectiveness that was virtually unprecedented in modern warfare.
Each number represented not just a successful shot, but a life-or-death moment where perfect precision had determined the outcome of critical situations.
Petty Officer Thompson felt a chill as he considered the implications of what they had just heard.
Their quiet instructor had taken 300 lives through individual actions that had probably prevented countless other casualties and achieved strategic objectives that would never be publicly acknowledged. Each of those engagements, Mitchell continued in his steady, quiet voice, represented a situation where precision shooting was the only viable solution to a complex operational problem. Some were high-value targets whose elimination prevented terrorist attacks. Others were enemy combatants who posed immediate threats to American personnel or civilian populations.
He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room. In several cases, single shots prevented situations that could have escalated into major international conflicts.
The room was completely silent as the SEALs absorbed the implications of Mitchell's operational history.
They were in the presence of someone whose individual actions had influenced global events in ways that would never be publicly recognized. Someone who had shaped history through perfect shots taken from impossible distances. The longest shot I mentioned on our first day, 2,047 meters, was taken to prevent the execution of 17 aid workers who had been captured by enemy forces, Mitchell revealed. Intelligence indicated that they would be killed within hours if immediate action wasn't taken. Lieutenant Sullivan found himself imagining the psychological pressure of such a shot. The lives of 17 innocent people depending on perfect execution of a technique at the absolute limits of human and technological capability, with no opportunity for a second attempt if the first shot failed.
The target was an enemy commander who was directing the hostage situation from a position that conventional assault forces couldn't reach without alerting other enemy personnel who would have immediately executed the hostages.
Mitchell continued. The shot had to be taken from extreme range, in challenging environmental conditions, with perfect precision on the first attempt. He described the operational conditions in detail that revealed the extraordinary complexity of the situation.
Multiple variables had to be controlled simultaneously. Environmental factors, timing coordination with rescue teams, intelligence updates about enemy dispositions, and ballistic calculations that accounted for conditions at the extreme limits of small arms effectiveness. The preparation for that shot required 36 hours in position, Mitchell said.
During that time, I couldn't move more than a few inches without risking detection by enemy surveillance systems. I had to maintain perfect shooting readiness while monitoring constantly changing environmental conditions and coordinating with multiple operational elements through concealed communication systems. The psychological demands of such a mission were staggering. Maintaining perfect mental discipline for 36 hours while carrying the responsibility for 17 innocent lives would test the limits of human endurance and mental strength. When the engagement window finally opened, I had approximately 45 seconds to complete range estimation, environmental analysis, ballistic calculation, and shot execution, Mitchell explained.
There was no margin for error. If the shot missed or was delayed, the hostages would be executed immediately.
Rodriguez found himself holding his breath as Mitchell described the final moments of the engagement. The convergence of technical skill, environmental factors, psychological pressure, and moral responsibility into a single moment of perfect execution seemed almost beyond human capability. The shot was successful, Mitchell concluded simply. The target was neutralized, and all 17 hostages were recovered safely during the rescue operation that followed. The understated way he described such an extraordinary achievement was characteristic of Mitchell's personality. But the SEALs now understood that this quiet manner concealed experiences that existed at the absolute limits of human capability and responsibility.
That engagement represents just one of the 300, Mitchell continued.
Each one presented unique challenges that required adaptation of basic techniques to specific operational conditions. Collectively, they represent 15 years of continuous development and refinement of precision shooting capabilities.
As Mitchell concluded his revelation about his operational background, the SEALs found themselves completely reassessing their understanding of their instructor. The quiet, mild-mannered individual they had initially dismissed was revealed to be one of the most effective combat operators in American military history.
The techniques you've learned during our time together, Mitchell said, represent knowledge that was developed through real-world application under conditions where failure meant not just mission failure, but the loss of innocent lives or strategic objectives that could affect global stability.
He paused, scanning the faces of the SEALs who had been transformed by their week of training with him.
You now possess capabilities that extend far beyond standard military marksmanship. More importantly, you understand the responsibility that comes with such capabilities.
Chief Williams raised his hand one final time. Sir, why are you sharing this knowledge with us? These techniques and this level of capability, it seems like information that would be closely guarded. Mitchell smiled slightly, the same expression they had seen briefly during their range sessions.
Because the world continues to present situations where these capabilities are necessary, and the community of people who possess them is very small, training exceptional operators like yourselves to understand and apply these techniques ensures that such capabilities remain available when they're needed. As the final session concluded, Mitchell distributed materials that contained advanced technical information, practice exercises, and contact protocols for accessing specialized equipment and continued training opportunities. The resources he provided represented access to capabilities that existed at the highest levels of American military technology.
Your training with me officially ends today, Mitchell announced, but your development of these capabilities has just begun.
The techniques you've learned require continuous practice and refinement to maintain proficiency at operational levels.
The SEALs gathered their materials with a sense of privilege and responsibility that none of them had expected when they first entered the classroom 5 days earlier. They had been trusted with knowledge and capabilities that could influence the outcome of critical situations, and they understood the weight of that responsibility. As they prepared to leave, Lieutenant Commander Sullivan approached Mitchell with a question that had been troubling him throughout the week.
Sir, knowing what we now know about your background and capabilities, why aren't you still actively deployed? Someone with your experience and skills would be invaluable for ongoing operations.
Mitchell was quiet for a long moment before answering.
15 years of operations at that level takes a toll that isn't immediately apparent.
The psychological weight of carrying responsibility for outcomes that affect innocent lives, strategic objectives, and global stability eventually requires stepping back from direct operational involvement.
He gestured toward the SEALs who were filing out of the classroom.
Teaching exceptional operators like yourselves allows me to continue contributing to national security objectives while passing on capabilities that took decades to develop. As the last of the SEALs departed, Mitchell remained in the empty classroom, surrounded by the equipment and materials that represented his life's work in developing precision shooting capabilities.
His quiet exterior remained unchanged, but there was something in his posture that suggested satisfaction in having passed on knowledge that would continue to serve important purposes. The transformation of the SEALs had been complete. Men who had initially mocked their weak instructor now understood that they had been trained by one of the most capable individuals in American military history.
They carried with them not just advanced technical knowledge, but also an understanding of the responsibility that came with possessing capabilities that could influence life and death situations.
The legend of the silent instructor would grow among the SEAL community, though the full details of Mitchell's background would remain classified for decades to come. What would endure was the knowledge that sometimes the most dangerous individuals are those who speak the softest, and that true lethality often comes wrapped in the most unassuming packages. 300 confirmed kills.
15 years of operations that shaped global events from the shadows. 1 week of training that transformed elite warriors' understanding of what was possible, when skill, technology, and responsibility converged in the hands of someone who had mastered the art of perfect precision under impossible conditions.
The silent instructor had revealed his secrets, and in doing so, had created a new generation of operators capable of continuing his legacy of precise, decisive action when the stakes couldn't be higher.